Alright guys, Lee dropped the PC011 Dynamic 5 years ago, and boom, suddenly every case manufacturer wanted to make a dual chamber panoramic glass case. I've been swamped with offers to check out these next big things, but honestly, most just felt like cheap knockoffs with less to offer. But hold on to your RGB keyboards because today is different. Meet the Gamdias Neso P1. Not just another clone, this might be the real deal and possibly the best case we've ever had on the channel. Let's check it out. Hey everyone, it's CJ from Elevated System. So Gamdias reached out with their new Neso P1 gaming case, and I'll be honest, my first thought was, wait, Gamdias makes PC cases? I've always associated them with budget peripherals like keyboards, power supplies, and CPU coolers. And when I caught wind that it was another PC011-esque design, I was ready to send my usual thanks, but no thanks. However, after diving into the details, I realized this wasn't just another clone, it actually might be offering more than any other case in its league. We'll dive deep into that, but first, let's walk through its specs and features. I'll show you what fits and what doesn't, share my build notes, the pros and cons, and given its unique design, we'll run some extensive tests, and of course, we'll wrap up with my final thoughts on the value of the Neso P1. Let's get started. The Gamdias Neso P1 is a dual chamber full tower ATX case measuring 490 by 310 by 495 millimeters. Motherboard compatibility, it's got you covered with mini ITX, micro ATX, and ATX motherboards. It can house CPU tower coolers up to 193 millimeters, graphics cards stretching up to 426 millimeters in length and 192 millimeters thick. ATX power supplies up to 180 millimeters find their home in the second chamber on the right behind the motherboard tray. Now, while the case doesn't come with any fans pre-installed, it can flexibly hold up to 11. We're talking either 3 120 or 3 140 millimeter side mounted, 3 120 or 2 140 millimeter on the top and bottom. The rear fits either a single 120 or 140 millimeter fan. Plus, there's a dedicated spot inside for a 120 millimeter fan. For those into liquid cooling, it supports up to a 360 millimeter top mounted radiator and a whopping 420 millimeter side mounted. Storage-wise, there are 2 removable drive trays at the back, each accommodating either a single 3.5-inch hard drive or 2 2.5-inch SSDs, and if you're skipping on the side-mounted fans, you've got 3 extra trays for 2.5-inch SSDs. Front I/O includes a power button, 2 5GB USB Type-A ports, a 10GB Type-C port, and a headset jack. At the back, 8 PCIe expansion slots are ready, and they can even rotate for that vertical mounting style. The left tempered glass side panel features a 1-button release with a swing open hinge. The front TG panel is also hinged and swings open. The top and bottom panels pop off with ball stud fasteners, revealing permanently affixed mesh filters. The rear panel is secured with a thumb screw and ball stud fasteners, and it's got a magnetically attached mesh filter covering its entirety. Inside the second chamber, beside the PSU and drive mounts, there's a tray for a fan hub, a deep cable management channel with Velcro straps, and ample space for cable management with several tie-down points. And to wrap it up, the Neso P1 sports a trapezoid shape and comes with feet that can be mounted either at the bottom or on the right side, allowing for both horizontal and vertical orientations. All of this at the launch price of $189 US. Alright guys, specs and features are just part of the story. To truly gauge a case, you gotta get hands-on and build in it, and that's exactly what I did with the Neso P1. Not once, but twice for this review. I've got the components list for both builds down in the description, so be sure to check that out. The key takeaway, both builds went off without a hitch. I'll get into performance with the standard test system later, but first let's dive into the demo system. The standard ATX motherboard slid right in. There's a ton of room and perfectly placed pass-throughs for all your cable management needs. However, I did spot a hiccup. Gamdias claims this case is eATX compatible, but there's no standoff locations for 330mm wide boards. Plus, the motherboard tray itself is only 300mm wide, so eATX enthusiasts, this might not be your jam. Cooling wise, I've got 10 fans humming in this build, 3 120s on the side and bottom, and one 140 at the rear, and a 360mm AIO up top. The side offers about 80mm of depth, so you're thinking push-pull with a 420mm radiator, you're golden. Gamdias even threw in some long screws for mounting standard 25mm thick fans at the bottom. The removable bracket up top made the AIL installation a dream. I opted for the radiator on top and fans below, but in retrospect, I should have went with the radiator and fans on the bottom of the bracket to cover up the pass-throughs and cables up top there. With 55mm of depth up there, RAM and VRM clearances is a non-issue. Plus, that provides room for an extra set of fans above. The top bracket has about 35mm of depth, so be mindful with thicker radiators. For GPU support, both my 300mm Aero and 325mm Red Devil looked almost dwarfed in this spacious case. Whether you're going vertical or horizontal, this case is capable of housing even the largest cards currently available. Transitioning in between horizontal and vertical graphics card mounting, just 5 screws and a twist of the PCIe slots. The case sets you up with the right standoffs, but you need to grab a PCIe riser cable. Cable management was a breeze. With the expansive chamber behind the motherboard, I had room for days. 10 fans, amazing RGB cables, power supply cords, everything just strapped neatly into the provided channel, a few zip ties here and there, and in under 5 minutes, I was all sorted. In conclusion, with dual swing open panels, a spacious secondary chamber, and handy top and bottom compartments, building in the Neso P1 was nothing short of delightful. Now, I did mention in the intro that this seemed like another PCO11 clone, but I can already hear the keyboards clacking. It looks like a height case. And you're right. The Neso P1 borrows heavily from the Height Y60 and Y40 design, from the 90-degree ventilation pattern to the top and bottom chambers, right down to the slide-out drive trays. So, did Gamdias just copy Height? Well, yeah, but let's be real. This happens all the time. Height took inspiration from Lian Li and added their twist, and Gamdias went a step further, refining the design even more. When I first saw this case online, I thought, looks cool, but I bet the build quality's gonna suck. Boy, was I wrong. This case boasts nearly 1mm thick 20-gauge steel with 14-gauge reinforcements in key areas. And compared to the Height case, there's significantly less plastic here. We're talking hefty thumb screws, reinforced hinges. This construction feels overly engineered in the best way. For instance, many panoramic cases have front panels that, when opened, cause the top to sag. Not the Neso P1. Swing open both tempered glass panels, and this case stands firm. It's right up there with Lian Li and Height in terms of build quality. But it's not all sunshine and rainbows. There are some hiccups. Like the Y60, the top panel is a two-piece design, steel on top and molded plastic inside, and those ball studs, plastic. So, of course, on just my second time removing the lid, one of them snapped off. Ball stud fasteners should always be metal. Period. Another hiccup, the front and side panel hinges are fixed. Unlike most cases, you can't just lift the panels off their hinges. This almost became disastrous for me during the build when I tilted the case and the side panel swung back, narrowly avoiding a disastrous collision with the thumb screw. Sure, you can unscrew the hinges to remove the panels, but that defeats the purpose of a toolless opening. Now, the biggest oversight, it's tied to one of the case's most unique features, the ability to swap the feet and reorient the case from vertical to horizontal. On my unit, Gamdias seems to have forgotten to thread the screw holes on the right panel, making it impossible to attach the feet. Now, I could use my tap set to cut the threads, but I opted for a workaround with a spare case screw. This might be a hurdle for the average user, though. I did ping Gamdias about this just yesterday, to be fair, so I'll pin their response once I hear back. Overall, the build quality is super solid. If it weren't for those few problems, the Neso P1 might have been the best built PC case to ever grace this channel. Alright folks, before we tie a bow on this review, let's dive into the thermals. Now, straight off the bat, this doesn't scream air-cooled focus case to me, but for the sake of thoroughness, I threw in my go-to test system, 3 120mm side-mounted intake fans and a 140mm exhaust fan at the rear. Pitting it against an open air test bench, here's what I found. Over 3 20-minute AIDA64 stress tests, the CPU temps remained consistent while the VRM temps dropped by a cool 4 degrees. After averaging 3 20-minute Port Royal loops, the GPU warmed up by just a single degree. These numbers are right up there with some of the best airflow cases I've reviewed recently. So even if this case has its sights set on liquid cooling, it handles air cooling like a champ. And remember, I only used a third of the potential fan slots. One thing to note, since this case doesn't come with stock fans, I didn't dive deep into formal noise level testing. After all, the acoustics will largely depend on your choice of fans and the case's orientation, so choose wisely. Alright guys, let's wrap up our in-depth analysis of the Gamdias Neso P1 PC case and take a moment to reflect on the highs and lows of this quick journey. In the vast sea of PC case designs, the Neso P1 attempts to carve out its niche. While it does borrow elements from other popular cases, it does introduce unique touches that set it apart. One standout feature is the ability to position the case either vertically or horizontally. Is it just a design gimmick, or is it a commitment to flexibility and user preference, offering builders adaptability and a fresh perspective on PC aesthetics? I'll let you decide on that one. The build quality of the Neso P1 is commendable, standing tall alongside industry giants like Lian Li, Fractal, and Inwin. From its sturdy steel framework to its albeit borrowed design cues, it's evident that Gamdias stepped up their game over their basic square box offerings. On the thermal front, the Neso P1 doesn't disappoint. Even though it leans more towards liquid cooling, its prowess in air cooling is undeniable, rivaling some of the best airflow cases on the market. And remember, this performance was achieved with just a fraction of its potential fan capacity. However, every rose has its thorns. They did stumble on a few issues like the plastic ball studs, the fixed front and side panels, and the threading oversight on the case feet, but here's the silver lining. Despite these setbacks, the Neso P1's value is hard to contest. It not only matches its competitors in features, but often outshines them. And the icing on the cake, a price tag that's commensurate with the competition. In conclusion, the Gamdias Neso P1 is a blend of innovation, quality, and value. Its unique design touches, especially the vertical and horizontal positioning, combined with its performance and competitive pricing, make it a compelling choice for PC enthusiasts. But what are your thoughts? Let us know below. As always, don't forget to click that like, and I'll see you in the next one.